Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today's video looking at some must-add players as we head into Week 12 of the fantasy football season. You know what just came to my mind is that Thanksgiving's this week, so 3 games that we probably won't get too much into in terms of my start and sit like we usually do each and every week, but maybe earlier on this week or maybe on Wednesday, we'll touch on each and every one of those matchups as well. But I got 10 guys here that you could add, and a very big focus this week on the running back position. There are some interesting players to add, some players that I'll give you an idea of what to do with fab, what to do with priority. But at first I was like, I don't think this is a very good week, but there are some players that are still pretty relatively low rostered, a few of which I've talked about before, but you need to make sure you're adding. Again, if you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. And as always, drop some comments down below. Let me know of any players you're considering dropping, adding. We're past that trade deadline point for most of you. For me, I got a few leagues I still can make some trades in. So if there's anything there, happy to answer them as well. And as well, check out our partners over at Betfred. Sign up at Betfred. You're going to get bet $50, register, deposit, bet $50, and they give you $250 in free bets as well. If you are going to sign up, that link is down below in the description. You should be betting on George Kittle over receiving yards tonight. If you're watching this before Monday Night Football, he's going against the Cardinals, who allow the league's worst 78 yards per game to the tight end position and over 7 receptions per game to the tight end position. And Kittle has gone over this number against the Cardinals 6 straight times, 6 straight. And he's listed anywhere from, I got it 41.5. I think it's up to maybe 44.5 now. I'd still play it. So definitely go look to do that at Betfred. That link is down below in the description. All right, let's get to the first player. We got a bunch of running backs. Then we'll get to some of the other positions. I got every position covered here. Starting with James Cook, 17% rostered. Coming off a game against the Browns where he was very explosive in his opportunities, had 11 carries for 86 rushing yards. And the big focus for me, especially throughout this video, will be those rookies, the late season rookies. That's where these guys start to emerge, start to give us their best fantasy production, and start to emerge in these offenses. So go take advantage of these opportunities you still have. Cook has seen 5+ touches in the last 4 weeks, which is great to see. I think the addition of Hines had me originally thinking that Cook's role here would diminish, but Hines has really had no impact in any part of the game, receiving or rushing. We didn't really expect it rushing, but the receiving is kind of surprising. Singletary's honestly been the mainstay as the receiving back as well. Cook has run some routes, but Singletary's far, far ahead. So for me, this is at the very least a handcuff, one of the now looking to be a very solid handcuff. But if the run game continues to be more of a focus, that makes him a little bit more of a high value handcuff in this offense. They've been able to run the ball well. And then on the other hand, like if you're in a bad spot with running backs right now, this team, the Bills on Thursday, are a double-digit favorite against the Lions. 10 or near double digits. I think they're -9.5. You know, this matchup here could lead to them being in a sizable lead, and that could lead to some more touches from James Cook because this was his second highest snap count of the season. The other one was Tennessee when they were up by like 30 points by halftime. So in those kind of game scripts, he's likely to see a bit more touches, but he's looked great in his touches, so he could earn some more opportunity. Next guy up here at the running back position, some surprising news before we got to the video here. Latavius Murray. He's 23% rostered. Do I think he's any good? No, not at all. But he does have a really good matchup, and the Broncos come into a game here against Carolina where they lose Chase Edmonds for an extended period with a high ankle sprain, and then they just waived Melvin Gordon after yet another fumble before halftime that was pretty costly. I'm interested to see where Gordon ends up if anyone picks him up, but now they're left with Latavius Murray, and let me know if you've heard this name before, Marlon Mack, who seems to be a preseason fantasy relevant player, but never actually ends up putting anything together when the games are actually played, and Divine Ozigbo are the other 2 guys on the practice squad. So I think they want to just give Latavius Murray this role. The Panthers are 28th in fantasy points allowed to running back, so a very plus matchup. Last week he had 21 touches on Sunday against the Raiders. Was he efficient with those touches? Not in the slightest, but at the end of the day here, this is a good matchup and a player who now assumes a lead role. For me, I have one league that I'm stacked at wide receiver, but just dying for someone to help me out at running back. Murray is honestly probably the guy to do that this week. But the thing is beyond this week, the upside is just completely out the window. He's got Baltimore, Kansas City, Arizona, LA, the Rams, and Kansas City. Like you could say the Kansas City games are like plus matchups, but Kansas City is just going to wipe the floor with these guys. Like Murray's not going to have a game script where he can run the ball like he did this past week. But in a matchup with Carolina, he can have that. So if you guys need a start, I'd be more willing to spend my fab on him. Like you could, I don't have a problem with you spending 20%. It's late in the season. This is a guy that can give you some value this week. And quite frankly, he'll be the RB1 on this team the rest of the season. So like maybe you are in such a bad spot that you might actually be willing to just take that and run with it. So it does make Murray a pretty high priority guy this week. The other one who is going to be seen as a high priority, but I would rather add Murray, is Samaje Perine. 8% rostered. Joe Mixon exits the game with a concussion. I think from the course of this season, we know that this is just going to lead to a one-game absence. It's pretty much happened to everybody. Even we saw it with Matt Stafford. We've seen it time and time again with every position. So expectation here is Perine's probably going to get this one game to himself. Obviously had a huge output last week against this past week against the Steelers, scoring 3 touchdowns. Now the matchup though is the Titans, and the Titans leave barely no upside for running backs. They're excellent against the run, and the Titans do not run the Bengals do not run the ball efficiently. So we got a pretty tough matchup. The thing is with Perine though, even we've seen as the backup, he does get opportunities and runs a decent amount of routes as a receiver. So in this matchup where the Titans will be able to generate a ton of pressure, we could see Perine being targeted in a lot of short yardage plays near the line of scrimmage. That could elevate his floor just enough to make him playable. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who I think is a very good handcuff, and he's proven that now this week with a big performance. But again, I would rather add Murray. But if you're in a spot where you're desperate, I can see I'm okay with spending maybe 10 to 15% of my fab on him. That would be where I would go. But Murray would be someone I'd rather add this week. All right, moving along with the running backs. Another one that's very interesting to take note of is Los Angeles. We'll get to both of these guys. I'm going to start with Cam Akers, 27% rostered right now. That roster percentage has just been coming down and down and down each and every week. But we have the potential here of a lengthy Stafford absence. Coming off of concussion, returns another concussion. That is not a good sign. We could see him I think he'll miss this week, and who knows what happens moving forward, because just multiple concussions in that short of a period is not a good thing. And this is definitely going to lead to a high-volume rushing game. And honestly, they could just shut Stafford down for the rest of the season. Their year is over. That loss to the Saints basically puts a pin in it for this year for Los Angeles. And if that happens, again, the rushing game will be at a higher volume. And if I look at their next 4 games, actually very plus matchups for running backs. Kansas City, they are 15.5-point underdogs, Kansas City. But Seattle, Las Vegas, and Green Bay, all of those teams outside the top 20 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. And Akers, looks to be right now 14 carries for 61 yards. He had 14 carries. Kyron Williams had 7, and Darrell Henderson had 2. Henderson played just 4 snaps. He played the first series, and then he was never seen again. I'm not sure why he was deserving of that, but regardless, he's definitely fallen out of favor with McVay. The thing for Akers, though, is he only ran 5 routes in this game. So he's not being used often enough in the passing game to give him any sort of decent floor. Because if I'm taking this guy just as my back and he gives me 14 for 61, I can't live with that, right? So let's get to Kyron Williams, who I undoubtedly think is the much better ad, and it's on that point. So we have this situation with Akers where he has been the leader in terms of carries last week. But the problem is that McVay just does not trust him as a pass blocker. So if this team is in trailing game scripts, which is likely to happen, this team is absolutely terrible this year. Just a lot of it comes down to that offensive line as well. But if they're in those situations, they're not going to put Akers on the field in trailing game scripts, because they're probably going to look to sneak in some run plays on those draws and whatnot, is where the rush attempts could come in the middle of those trailing game scripts. But you look at Kyron Williams, and he's doubled his snaps from last week, his first week in the league, to this week, more than doubled them. And he led running backs in snaps. He played 35, Akers played 25, and like I mentioned, Darrell Henderson played 4. So the other thing is Kyron Williams has been the more efficient runner. He's had 8 carries on the year so far, 45 rushing yards, 5.6 yards per attempt. That's much, much better than what Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers have provided. If Kyron Williams is still available, and it seems like in any league I'm in with some people who are smart, he's not available, but 28%, he's available in a lot of leagues. There's plus running game matchups here for the next 4 games. I think you need to add Kyron Williams. Of these 2 guys, I still would add them both. I think there's enough there with Akers that you got to at least tuck him away and see what happens. But Kyron Williams is a player, if he's available, he would be my number 1 ad on the week. He would be my number one ad over Latavius Murray. So I would look to spend 20+% of fab if he's available, because I think it's a situation here where it's all pointing towards Kyron Williams like potentially completely taking over, just with the downside of both Henderson and Akers in terms of, what they don't do well has been a frustration for McVay. All right, moving on to wide receivers. Sky Moore. He's only 6% rostered, coming off of a solid performance against the Chargers. He had 5 receptions for 63 yards. What really stuck out to me and was a bit surprising was he only ran 16 routes, so 6 targets on 16 routes run is equal to a 37.5% target rate. Very, very good. Those are the kind of things you look for a player to take their opportunity and demand volume, demand targets, and then that's probably going to lead to more opportunity. Just why wouldn't it? But the one thing that was weird is that Justin Watson did lead the team in routes run, and they're kind of running from the same spot. But Kadarius Toney's injury makes it seem as though I doubt he's going to be back next week. We just know how this Toney thing goes with the hamstrings. It's just probably not going to be something that he's available very soon. And then Hardman is out on IR. And then do we really expect Juju to return after? I shouldn't laugh, but that hit was very, very bad, and something that we kind of saw similarly to like the Tua injury. Do we really expect him to return this next week? I don't think so, honestly. I don't think so. So it could lead to a lot of opportunity for Sky Moore to elevate his role in this offense and be the potentially, between MVS, who just never can demand volume regardless of the opportunity, and then Justin Watson and Sky Moore. So Moore has a chance to really elevate himself in this offense. Another rookie who could see a late season breakout just with the way this rotation is breaking down with these injuries. So I definitely like Sky Moore as a solid ad this week. But one guy I do like better, Treylon Burks. Talk about him far too often here, but he's still only 20% rostered, coming off a fantastic week against the Packers. 8 targets, 7 receptions, 111 yards. You almost forgot about him because of this game being on Thursday night, but I'll make sure that you don't. 38% target per route run, just really solid numbers here. And their usage with him, we're seeing him targeted around the line of scrimmage and short yardage, but we're also seeing him look to downfield. We know what A.J. Brown was able to do in this offense. I think Burks has a very similar profile. He did it in college. I mention this all the time. But the thing is it's probably more of a stash play. They do have Cincinnati up next and then Philadelphia. But up afterwards, the following weeks are solid. Jacksonville, and then the Chargers, and then Houston. Those 3 weeks are really nice. That's the last week of the fantasy season, regular season, and then the first 2 weeks of the playoffs. So those are plus matchups for him. That's where we could see ultimately some better performance. And this is another, once again, late season rookie potential to break out. Another late season rookie that I do think you should add, Alec Pierce, 17% rostered right now. Matt Ryan being at quarterback definitely elevates this passing game and is definitely much preferred over what they had before with Sam Ehlinger. So he only had 3 receptions this past week for 28 yards, but if you look through those numbers, it's actually a little bit better than what he was able to produce from a fantasy perspective. He actually saw 8 targets and had the highest average depth of target amongst the wide receivers on his team. And his 11.9 yards of average depth of target is actually top 30 on the season amongst wide receivers. They have a great matchup this week, Monday night, Steelers, and the Steelers are dead last in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So potential for a really good matchup for Pierce and pretty much everybody in this passing game. I know Paris Campbell was the one to have the better performance, but we did see Pierce run more routes than Campbell, and I do like going to a guy, him being on the outside and the potential for some more big plays in an offense that definitely puts a priority on running the ball. And he was second on the team in routes run behind Michael Pittman this past week. So I like what I'm seeing there. Paris Campbell's up to over 40% rostered. I like going a little bit of a sneakier route here with Alec Pierce. All right, moving on to our one tight end. We'll do one tight end, one quarterback to wrap things up. Juwan Johnson, 30% rostered, coming off a stat line of 4 targets, 3 receptions for 47 yards and a touchdown against the Rams. He's had a touchdown in now 3 straight games, and he scored 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games. So those are the types of things where, the tight end position is a massive dart throw. It's hard if you don't have, your Travis Kelce, your Mark Andrews to find someone to be reliable. Juwan Johnson's proven to be reliable the last 5-6 weeks here now. So The other thing that makes me feel good about him, he's a player we've talked about quite a bit on this show. He's 8th amongst tight ends in routes run, so he's out there a ton. He's 10th in average depth of target. That's because he's running routes not just in line. He's running out of the slot, a little bit out wide as well. 15th in targets, 14th in receptions. Ride this guy while the touchdowns are still hot, and he's someone that's very much involved in the passing game that some of these other tight ends can't really say. That's just from the perspective of the Saints, really just running with Chris Olave and then whoever else for the majority of this season. Johnson still at 30%. He's someone I do still want to add, even with a tough matchup against San Francisco coming up this week. Last player, quarterback, Marcus Mariota. I wish you guys know that Geno Smith is like 60, maybe 70% rostered in fantasy this season. I'm shocked. I can't believe that. Mariota's under 50%, 43%. He's got a matchup with Washington. I like that matchup with Washington because what it'll lead to is the Falcons having to run the ball less. The Commanders are excellent against the run. When we hit the Betfred Boost this past weekend, it was Dameon Pierce under rushing yards. He had 10 rushing yards in the game. It's because nobody can run the ball on this Commanders team. The Falcons will need to throw the ball. And not only would that lead to more opportunity for Mariota to put up points from a passing perspective, but I can see a lot more off-script rushing attempts from Mariota where he's scrambling out of the pocket, picking up yards on the run, and he's added like 35. He's averaging like 35 yards rushing per game on the season, so that helps elevate his floor. But not only that, Washington, 23rd in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, so still a good matchup here for Mariota. With sans Kyle Pitts, that's not going to be too helpful, but I still have faith here in a guy like Drake London to be able to perform and put up some numbers for Mariota and be reliable against this Washington secondary. So those are the 10 must-add players for this week. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed, and as always, comment down below if there's any questions you have for me. And of course, go check out our friends over at Betfred. Again, sign up, bet $50. You're going to get $250 in free bets. And George Kittle tonight. Don't miss on George Kittle tonight. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.